Sarah from Minerva Public Library, and this is the video tutorial for how to make a magic Shrinky Dink pin of your own. If you're watching this video, you likely have recently picked up your summer reading Make and Take Kit for ages 10 and up, week number 1, Witches, Wizards, and Warlocks. Reach into your bag. You should have, in fact, a plastic bag that contains almost everything you need. Information that I'm going to tell you in this video is not terribly different from what you have in your written instructions, but I've personally found that sometimes actually watching these things happen and hearing them will help when just reading alone won't. So, first things first, Shrinky Dink sheets. There are two sides to the Shrinky Dink sheets. One side is going to feel a little rougher. This is the side that you will use colored pencils and regular pencils on. The side that feels smoother is the one that you can use Sharpies on if you want. You are certainly welcome to use both Sharpies and colored pencils, but if you do so, you still want to stick to the correct sides with something on one side, then flip it over, color with the other thing on the other side. It'll still look fine when it comes together at the end. Something else to keep in mind is that Shrinky Dink sheets shrink in the oven. It's how they get their name. So if you plan on making, for instance, a sticky back pin, which you should have in your bag, you're going to want to size your design accordingly. Keep in mind that it is going to shrink down to somewhere around half its original size or a third of its original size. Make sure that your design is large enough that it is going to cover your pin back. You can also turn your Shrinky Dink into a charm by making sure that you cut or hole punch a hole or two in your design, but keep in mind those holes are also going to shrink in size. So personally, I would recommend doing like 2 or 3 hole punches just sort of all together and then smoothing it out with some scissors. You want to make it larger than you think it's going to need to be, so when it shrinks, it will still work. So, design time. You can come up with anything you want and draw it on. You are welcome to also use these to trace. You can trace something of your own, or you can also trace something that you've printed off from online or from a book. Personally, today, for this example, I'm going to be using this image that I printed off from online. It is a shield belonging to a knight, Lady Calidre of Mendelin, from Tamara Pierce's Protector of the Small Quartet. It's one of my favorite young adult series, and if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. Personally, since I am tracing, and I'm going to be using colored pencil, I'm checking, making sure my rough side is up. I stick it down, and then all I need to do is tape down the edges so it doesn't slide around. Because there's nothing quite like getting something where you think you have it all right, and then suddenly you realize your image shifted and it's all a mess and it's a pain. You don't want that. You can tape down all 4 sides if you want, or you can tape down just 2. It's up to you. If, as you look at your colored pencils or your Sharpies and you go, I don't know what color this is going to actually look like once it bakes, you can always cut out a small scrap of Shrinky Dink, scratch on it on the correct side, and then go through the same baking instructions more or less that you would for a larger item, and then take it back out of the oven, and then you should be able to see how much the color has intensified. I will say, in favor of Sharpies, they have a much bolder color than the colored pencils do. They also are not going to show your sort of stroke marks, sort of the grain of your drawing, in the same way that a colored pencil will. But in favor of the colored pencil, you can erase mistakes if you have a good eraser, and I am very fond of being able to erase mistakes. So, your image, if you are like me, is taped down. You can either outline first, or you can color first and then add in an outline after. All right, we're coloring. We are all colored. It looks beautiful. So now what? Now, personally, I would recommend that you go into the kitchen and you turn your oven on. It can be either a conventional oven or a toaster oven, but you do not want to use a microwave oven. It will not work properly and it will cause a huge mess. While your oven is preheating to somewhere between 325 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit, you are going to go in search of a baking tray, like the sort you would use to bake cookies. If you have one, great. Set it down, go back to your bag, and get your piece of parchment paper, which you should have, once again, inside that little bag. And it's very clear what it is. It looks very different. It looks almost like parchment itself. You are going to line your baking tray with that. So what do you do if you do not have a cookie sheet? It's relatively simple. You just need some aluminum foil. You're going to set it down. You are going to fold all of the sides in part way, like so. Oh, and this keeps sticking to things. We don't want that. Fold these on in. We are creating a tray, essentially, of our very own. All right, so I have this done now. Now, because I'm making a fairly small tray, notice that I am pinching upwards. I'm taking this. I am pinching upwards. I'm now going to take this edge, point it down, pinch, and oh, there we go. I've got one edge of my tray. And I'm going to keep going like that until I have all of my edges up. Since my design is not very large, it's going to be able to fit in here just fine. If you're making something that is larger though, you're going to need more tin foil, or you're going to need to make the edges just less thick. All right. Often will turn out looking a little bit like some sort of a boat. There we go. In fact, this looks a lot like a boat. I am going to put my colored image down in just a minute. Now I will say, while you need to use the parchment paper for an actual baking pan, it is optional if you are doing the aluminum foil tray. That's because the parchment paper's purpose is to protect your baking pan, just in case any of the colors decide to leach off, or in case something weird happens with the plastic. Whereas with the aluminum foil, first of all, it's less likely to stick than it is to a metal pan. And secondly, if anything goes wrong and you end up with some weird coloration on your aluminum foil, you don't care. You're probably going to toss it anyways. Go back, and our oven is still preheating, likely, though some ovens will do it faster than others. You are going to get your image, and you will see mine right here. You will notice that I have drawn on a larger loop that I'm going to color in just a minute. And then I'm going to go in with a hole punch a couple of times right there to create a hole. Then I'm going to put it down in here. I could line this with parchment paper, but I don't have to, so I'm not going to. When your oven is preheated sufficiently, you are going to go on over, open the oven door, and put in your tray containing your cut out Shrinky Dink image on it. I will say also, when you are cutting out your Shrinky Dink image, be careful. The edges, when you cut, can be a little sharp. Your image is on here. You put it in an upper rack in the oven. Now you can choose whether or not you want to close the oven door. Personally, I enjoy leaving it open a crack so I can peek on in and watch what's happening. What's happening is inside the oven, your Shrinky Dink design is going to, over the time, curl up on the edges and then gradually curl back down and flatten out. You want to let it sit in the oven for about a minute before you check it any further. Unless you've made a really large design, it should have started to curl back down, if not entirely by now. Then give it another 1 to 2 minutes. I personally suggest setting a timer, but if you are good with keeping track of time, you can certainly just watch the clock. When the timer goes off, you are going to grab a pair of oven mitts or oven gloves, put them on your hands, carefully lift the tray out of the oven, and set it down on a heat-resistant surface like the burners on your stove. If you do not own any gloves or mitts that are made for ovens, then I would suggest getting a cloth towel, folding it over several times, and carefully using that to lift it out. You do not want your hands to touch the hot metal, obviously, because it will burn you and nobody enjoys that. Along those lines, your image is up. It is shrunk. It is beautiful, but oh no, it decided to do something weird. It's all twisted. Don't fret, you can still fix this, but you want to be very careful handling it because it is still hot. What you're going to do is you are going to take one side of your parchment paper and flip it over so that your Shrinky Dink is sandwiched in between the two. If you didn't use parchment paper to begin with, now is a good time to go get it and stick it on top. Find something heavy, like a phone book. Stick it down on top of that parchment paper and press down firmly for somewhere between 30 seconds to a minute. Release, take it off, take a look. If it's now straight enough, great. Proceed to the next step. If it isn't, you can always pop it back in the oven for another minute or two, let it start to flatten back down again, and if need be, go through this flattening procedure again. So your image is ready. You're going to want to let it sit for at least a minute before you handle it. Personally, I would say at least 3 minutes. When it's ready, you are going to take it on over. You are almost done. In fact, here is my baked Shrinky Dink image. You will notice that the hole that I made has decreased in size considerably. I used Sharpie on the outline that I added, and the rest of it is largely colored pencil. Now all I need to do, because I made this pendant, is string something on through it and turn it into a necklace or a keychain. However, if you are making it into a pin, now is the time for you to carefully peel that very thin little strip off. Do not peel off that spongy foam part. That is what has the adherent, and you need it to actually have your pin stay attached to your design. Pick whichever side of your design you don't think looks as good. Decide where you want the pin to be, and it's all peeled off. You press down firmly for somewhere between 20 to 40 seconds. Release, and you should in fact be good to go. I've found that these pins are fairly sturdy, and you will notice right here, in fact, with this Celtic knotwork wolf that I traced, it is staying put very well. The other design that I tested was a leaf of Lothlorien from Lord of the Rings. You will notice that this is only a little bit bigger than my pinky nail. Maybe the size of 2 pinky nails. This was not done on purpose. This was because although I knew that my Shrinky Dink would shrink, I did not realize quite how much it would shrink. So that is the reason I have given you 2 Shrinky Dink sheets. If you make mistakes, you should be able to make more. And if you didn't make mistakes, well, you have more materials to make different things. I hope that this video has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to come into the library. Ask for Miss Sarah at the youth desk. I'd also love to see all of your creations, so show them to me downstairs at Youth Services. We're also on social media. We are on Facebook and Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. Please tag us with your images. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you at the library. Bye.